episode serves two parts. One is the origin story of the name of this podcast, Romancing the Threshold. But more importantly, my current focus in working with romance novels as shadow work, as medicine. And the second part is to show you a little bit of what I've discovered in doing this work with myself and what I want to share with you, the listener, the reader. So the story starts with once upon a time, almost 20 years ago, I wrote my master's thesis called The Healing Power of Fluff. I know, that was a serious thesis. I was graduating from Pacifica Graduate Institute with a master's in counseling psychology, which had an emphasis on depth psychology, Jungian psychology, and all that. And in the beginning, I was actually supposed to be writing about something quite serious. I was about to weave my thesis. My original idea was to weave astrology and depth psychology by working with the archetype of Saturn and clinical depression. I know, very heavy, very serious. And I was completely stuck. I could not write a word of that thesis. I couldn't read the books. I couldn't do the research. I was so stuck. And at some point, kind of starting to get really anxious, the clock was ticking, I had a dream. I had a dream that I was attending the wedding of Keira Knightley, the actress, and some other actor. And the wedding was a beautiful pageantry. And I was mesmerized with the beauty of it all. And I just got to sit with that dream of what does that mean to be witnessing such a beautiful wedding? And in working with that dream, to make a long story short, working with that dream, I came to the realization I needed to change my thesis topic. And that was a huge, major left turn. Everything was already set up for Saturn and depression. And all of a sudden, I had to come to my professors and say, hey, I'm changing my topic, completely different thesis, idea, and strategy. Thank God that they all said yes to it. And The Healing Power of Fluff was born, and it was about exploring the heroine's quest for love in romantic comedies and working with romantic comedies as one would work with a dream. Because, that's kind of like cinema therapy. Whatever you watch, you can work with that as you would work with your own personal dream. And I really feel like this is a wonderful kind of work, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're constantly watching the same thing. But I decided to write that thesis, and I call it The Healing Power of Fluff, because since the emphasis of my master's degree was around depth psychology, everything, of course, very deep, dealing with the unconscious, it was kind of a joke that I started saying yes to the power of fluff. And it all started with this joke between me and my classmates that underneath all that depths, there was fluff, and underneath the fluff, there was depths. So I worked with the romantic comedies. I picked 3 of them to work with as if I was exploring a dream, each one sort of setting the stage of where the heroine was in her process of development. I worked with Bridget Jones' Diary, if you remember that one. The other one was called Something New. And the last one was one of my favorite movies, it still is, called Under the Tuscan Sun. And I wrote the thesis. Part of the thesis process was to I wrote a fairy tale based on my own life, based on my own quest for romantic love. And I got to illustrate that fairy tale, which was pivotal because it was the return. It was the thing that helped me return to making art again after 16 years of not drawing anything, of sort of shutting down that part of me, but with the thesis that came back. But more importantly, working with the thesis, I didn't just write it. I didn't do just the theory. After writing it, I lived it. I did everything I wrote. I explored the dreams I had. I explored the things I was watching. I recreated a ritual to reconnect with my inner other. And I got back to doing my artwork. And about 1.5 years later, I met who is now my husband. And AKA, I found my romantic other. And here's the interesting thing. I dedicated that thesis to my mother. My mother was, to me, the first person who read fairy tales. She's the one who introduced to me the fairy tales, gave me my first books, helped me learn to love books and stories. And now looking back after her death, it's interesting because in many ways I feel like she gave me the medicine, but she was also the one in many ways who gave me the wound. And she gave me this medicine to help heal the wound. And now, it's more than a year now that she's died. I spent my last year in what I've been calling my cave year, sort of healing from burnout, from coaching, and also, dealing with the grief, dealing with the very physical, bureaucratic side of death, which is dealing with one's state after they die. And so that was my cave year. And the thing that stayed with me from that cave year, that kind of was my lifeline, was reading romance novels, something I didn't think I was going to do. But by book 30 or book 50 that I was reading, I thought, I can't, this has a resonance to something I know. And I realized I was tapping back into my thesis. The idea of working with something like it's a dream, that there's more underneath the fluff than meets the eye. Except that instead of romantic comedies, I was reading romance novels. And I think this is important because when I look back at that, I thought, oh, wow, like a full eclipse cycle, 18, 19 years later, here comes back. My thesis returns. And now it's deepened, it's expanded. If the difference then, I would say the difference between now and then is that back in 2007, 2008, when I was writing the thesis, living the thesis, I was looking for the beloved one out there, the partner, the romantic partner. And thank God I found them, and it's great. But now, 2025, 2026, it's not so much looking for the beloved out there at this point. It's not about preparing to meet someone. It's about preparing to meet myself. The parts that I've hidden, the parts that I've dimmed down to keep the peace. I had a complicated relationship with my mother, so in many ways, her death set me free from those constraints of the relationship. But in reading those novels, in a way, I feel like now it's the quest, it's the heroine's quest. Not so much to find the partner, but it's bigger. It's about finding what is the desire that is mine. Where do I want to go? Where is my sovereignty as an individual, as a self? And also in being able to claim the hidden parts of myself that, like I said, I dimmed down, I hid away, I've forgotten about it. So, in essence, the thesis was the original spell, the original romantic spell. And now we're just at a deeper cauldron. We're going deeper into what I've been exploring with romance novels. So here's the thing that I find in looking back in my life now, looking at all the things that I've written, looking at my book collection that I've been unpacking from the recent move I just had, is that there's a through line to everything I've been exploring in my life. In many ways, I've always been interested in what is underneath what most people dismiss as not important. It's a guilty pleasure. It's just fluff. It is minimal. It is always just this thing I do on the side. I've always been interested in those things, the thing that is hidden right underneath our noses, but we refuse to look at it because we don't think it's important. It doesn't matter. It's not serious enough. I played the serious card pretty well. As I've said before, I was a nonfiction reader for most of my life. And me, who loves fairy tales and mythology, all of a sudden having to kind of give myself my own slap across my face to be like, oh my God, romance novels, it's right here. It's the modern fairy tales. And the other thing I started noticing too, as this past year, as I started reading romance novels and talking to other folks, mainly women in this case, it's how much it's dismissed. It's still dismissed even by the voracious reader of romance. It's something one does to escape, to fantasize. It is not taken as seriously. It's a guilty pleasure. It's escapism. And I think those things, sure, there's a truth to that. But I think there's more, because what I could see in my own experience of the reading romance novels so focused in one year is that I noticed one that there was a spark in it that I was reading and feeling it. It's like a live wire. That was the lifeline I had. And I started noticing that I wasn't just reading the stories for the sake of the story. Are they fun? Are they great? Are the plot marks hitting? Is the spice level good? It wasn't just about that. I started noticing quickly that I was reflecting on what was happening to me personally. So right here you have two levels. And this is the reason, I think, because of reading romance novels, I got into thinking, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the idea of how do we navigate change, the threshold that I was in and still am, and we are culturally in together. How do we approach change, but not just like bracing for the impact of change, because fear and doom and gloom is everywhere, so it's making us tense up. But I was thinking about how do we approach change and navigate it with the curiosity of lovers. That's the idea of romancing the threshold, of approaching change, however we do it, but approaching as if we're doing it like it's a romance novel. Like, how do we approach it with that curiosity of a lover? So that's one. That's kind of the origin, the seed idea of the podcast, which is still finding its own footing. And now, more importantly, how I want to work with romance novels, kind of bringing in everything that I have built in my life with archetypal astrology, with depth psychology, aka Jungian psychology, all my readings of mythology and fairy tales. That's been years and years and years. Putting it all together into this sort of big salad and working with now romance novels. That's the origin of the thesis. I was working with romantic comedies, which, by the way, it's of course a film genre that is also dismissed, much like romance novels are dismissed, not taken seriously. So going back, two levels right here. Level one, we read for the pleasure and the preference, right? So we read those books because we like it certain tropes, we prefer certain types of characters. And when you ask someone, oh, you read that book, what you're going to hear is, I loved it, the spice was good, oh, the hero or the heroine was, insert adjective. Yeah, no, I gave it 3 stars because the ending was rushed. So we stay on the plot. We stay on the story arc. This is the level of book reviews. This is the level of book talk. This is the hashtag book Instagram. This is fun. This is the foundation of everything, right? We do it for the pleasure. We do it if we go through it, if we like it or not. If we don't like it, we drop it. This is that first level that I would say is when the body says, yes, I want to read this. This cover looks good. I like this kind of trope. I like the texture of the cover. It is that sort of more physical side of the reading. There's a sense of pleasure, reading for the pleasure of it. The second level, it brings in the personal psychology. So this is when you're reading the book and you're starting to think, why is this book activating me? Why do I like this and don't like that? Where are my triggers? And this is the part where you're reading it and you think, wow, why do I read so many books that are enemies to lovers? Or why do I like cowboy books? Or why do I really prefer a good thriller / romance? And this is when you start looking at your own life, what you're going through, and thinking, what is this book affecting? How is it affecting me? And I started noticing that, especially when I would pick any book, read the synopsis, and be like, okay, fair enough, this sounds good. Personally, I love an enemies to lovers trope. And so if there was sort of Beauty and the Beast kind of vibe and enemies to lovers, sign me up, I'm reading it. And if you add a castle to it, that's the cherry on the sundae. So I would read those, read the synopsis, start reading, and then I was like, wow, this book is talking about grief, which, side note, so many books about romance talk very deeply and actually quite well about grief. And I would see books that were talking about very challenging relationships with the mother figure, sometimes with the father figure. And what I thought was interesting is that a lot of times this was not in the synopsis. I wouldn't even see this really in the book reviews. But as I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is really hitting me right where I need it. And I started thinking, wow, it's not so much that I am choosing the book. It's almost like the book is choosing me, or we're choosing each other. And I found that really interesting. This is the level 2 of reading where I was like, okay, how is this book affecting me? What is it showing me? Where in my life there's a resonance to this story? And I think this is really important. And I think a lot of people do get to this level of reading where they look at it and they think, oh, why is this affecting me? And that's why people will write in their reviews, oh, this book destroyed me, or this book really made me cry. I shed tears. But I am actually more curious to why the tears? Why the certain sort of rage against the book, or why the sort of loyal love to that book or a certain series? And so I think this is important to look at. And of course, I guess I cannot take my therapeutic training hat off, is to look at what did the book find within my psyche, or vice versa, that I haven't been able to name it yet consciously, but through the story, something is being worked through. This is the idea where stories are healing. Stories fulfill something that is quite personal, right? So you could talk to someone about a certain character, a certain book. It's not going to be always the same resonance at all, perhaps none, because your personal psychology, what you're going through, is metabolizing the story of the book, right? So that's level 2. And I think that in book clubs, which is great that there are more book clubs exploding, if you will, popping up everywhere. It's great. But I think in a lot of these book clubs, it's safer to stay in level 1. We talk about the plot. We talk about what worked in the plot for us or not, and we stay in that level 1. It is a little harder. You would have to create a safer container to be able to get to level 2, where we get to talk about why did this story affect me in a deeper level. And of course, that's where I'm already interested in that level because, well, it's the background of my work. But there is a third level. And I like to think of the third level as the collective dream. So perhaps this third level is the one that is the biggest, the strangest, and the one that I'm not going to go in depth talking about it in this episode because I want to talk more about it in my Forbidden Doors 6-week intensive around romance novels as medicine. And the idea here is that the third level is, the question started coming to me when I was reading. If so many people, millions of people reading these stories, something is being processed, is being metabolized through these stories. And I think it's 2 levels. One, it's the cultural element. Why are these stories popping up? Certain tropes, certain subgenres of romance are popping up at this moment right now in our culture. So for an example, dark romance surging in the romance book sections Well, right in time with our culture, doing a lot of things against women's sovereignty, women's rights. Or we can think about monster romances where the hero, if you will, the main love attraction, stays monstrous. What is that about? The monster is no longer transforming into a handsome prince. He stays monstrous. It's the inner beauty. It's the inner dynamic between the characters that is valued. It is not the external appearance. And what is that about? Women collectively choosing the beast over the prince. I think it goes beyond the social media question, would you go for a bear or would you go for a man? So the level 3 explores romance as a cultural dream. So one, you get to look at what is happening in the culture that is allowing these types of stories to gain even more ground. And also, in some ways, I think there's a collective dream. When we are reading these books and we are in it, something is getting to be practiced. It's kind of like a rehearsal, like people do visualizations, right? Before you do a race or a game, you envision yourself doing something to win or achieve your goals. Sometimes I think the romance books are kind of doing the same thing. But like I said, this is something I would like to flesh out a bit more during the 6-week intensive of my Forbidden Doors. But for now, this is where I want you to think about when you're reading. And this, while I'm talking about romance novels, think about your general reading. Think about, especially if it's stories, let's stay with fiction in this case. What is it about the stories? The level 1. What is your body doing? What's the reaction of when you read them? Why do you grab that book? Is it the cover? Is it the plot? Is it both? What is it telling you? What's the information you're gathering? Then, of course, it's how do you feel about that book? How do you feel about the story? Does it make you feel something? Does you give you a little, something is happening? So this is the level 1. And here's where actually I want to invite you. I jumped ahead a little bit here. This is actually where I invite you. Look at what you're reading. Do it tonight. Whatever book you're reading, grab it. This is a practice. And ask yourself, level 1, what is my body doing? What's my reaction to this story? Do I feel excited? Do I feel flaccid? Do I feel sort of emotional? Even when I shut the book because it annoys me, what is it about that? That's a huge piece of information. And just notice how your body reacts. What are the thoughts and feelings? What's the motivation? None of this is frivolous. Everything here is sort of like that first breadcrumb that if you keep following, it's going to lead you to some interesting places. Then the level 2 is the second question. What is it about this story right now that mirrors something in my life, a certain phase you're going through, right? So you look at it, what was it about this kind of plot, this kind of book that attracted you? Or perhaps you had a resistance to it. And that resistance is important as well. Sometimes I think the resistance is even more important than the flow of it. What is it about this world building? What is it about this place, this type of story that is giving you something? Is it hitting on something that's actual in your life, that's happening, or is it hitting on something that you're hungry for? Ooh, that's even better. What is it that you're hungry for? Think about that. Sit with that story, that book, and say, why is this hitting me right now? Or if you're kind of reading several books pretty quickly and they all have a similar theme, similar trope, then the question is even more potent. What about these books are showing you something that your psyche is working on? And what is it? Sit with that. And if you like to journal, that's a good journal exercise. Now, the level 3, if you want to go there, I would invite you to ask yourself, why now? Why this story right now? You're not the only one reading this book, so zoom out. Why is it perhaps thousands of people were reading this kind of book? So for many, many women reading this kind of book, what is the medicine in this book? Yes, you can say, sure, sometimes the marketing is so good that a lot of people are going to buy the book. But it's beyond the marketing, because no matter how good the marketing is, if it doesn't hit that archetypal chord, it doesn't matter how good the marketing is. The marketing is good, but it has to hit that archetypal chord. And if a book is all over the place, everybody's reading it, something about that is hitting on a collective experience. And that's my invitation to you to think about, what do you see? What do you notice? What is that book, that kind of story, or that series saying about the collective moment? Now, if you don't come up with anything, that's totally fine, perfectly healthy and normal. But I want you to think about it. It's like, it's not just a guilty pleasure. It is something bigger. And I want you to sit with that question, if that resonates with you. What is it about that that's hitting the nerve collectively right now? And perhaps why? So I invite you to do these tonight. Just pick up whatever you're reading, maybe, or the last book you just read that really stayed with you, and do these questions. Level 1. What is this? How this book affects me now? What is it about it? What is it, the plot? How does it make my body feel, the reactions I have with the book? Then level 2, how does the story resonate with what's happening in my own life? And then level 3, how is this playing out with the collective? So I think that matters as a reading exercise to help us move from the idea of consuming or just plain entertaining and really engaging and relating to the thing. It's the collective dream, right? You're in it. You're not just passively ingesting the story. You're metabolizing the story. The story is working through you. Not that everybody has to do this. Sometimes you just want to read for the good plot. But I feel it's like food. If you chew it better, if you have better ingredients, it is more nutritious for your body. And so when you're reading, if you're not just consuming it, but you're really working with it in these 3 levels, maybe just the first 2 levels, it's totally fine. It is already helping you have your reading be much more nutritious for your psyche and as well for the collective. Because what happens to you, you are not like Las Vegas. What happens with you stays in Vegas or stays just with you. It always spreads and ripples out in ways that you have no idea how that works, but it does. Well, look at me. I was just reading my books, thought that it's just as me in my cave here, but this has already inspired me to work with romance novels in a very different way and to bring in everything that I know that I've worked with, astrology, coaching, depth psychology, all, and throwing in, now mixing it all up with romance. Doesn't stay with me. It moves forward. This is why I think it's so important, because from a collective aspect, if we zoom out right now and look at what's happening in the world, it's easy to say, and I think you can't argue with that really, that we are living through a collective threshold, right? The old structures, political, social, relational, are all molting. They're crumbling. They're just not giving us the same pep that they used to before. And the new ones, they aren't fully yet fleshed out either. There are seeds of them. They're starting to sprout, but they're not quite fully there. So collectively, we are in this in-between space, in this liminal space. And what I see a lot is, and it has its place, I'm not saying it doesn't, but it has its place. The official sort of prescription for these moments is resistance. Stay informed, stay outraged, stay vigilant. Doom scroll so you don't miss anything. Fight back. And I think it has its place. It does have its place. It is a certain kind of impulse. And some days I feel that way. But I have not spent pretty much my lifetime inside mythology and fairy tales and thinking about stories to see that resistance alone just keeps us at a war of attrition. Everything that defines us is in the opposition that we're fighting. So whatever we're fighting, they seem to have the control of the energy. They set the agenda. And what I've noticed in stories, both the fairy tales, the myths, and now the romance novels, is that something has to be done differently. And it is not resistance. It's actually metabolizing. It is not ignoring the darkness, but taking it in, transforming. There's a certain kind of alchemy. It's breaking it down. And so everything that is extracting right now that they want, they extracting things out of us. But we're not giving enough time to metabolize things. We're not giving enough time to grieve, right? And so I think there's a lot of material inside all of us and within the collective that needs to be metabolized. It needs to be transformed into something that's actually going to nourish us. That's what the alchemists did, right? And fairy tales do, and mythology does. And I feel that because there's so many people reading romance novels, and it is dismissed as fluff, escapism, I feel like we're not tapping into the nutritious medicine that it's offering us. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't problems with the romance genre. There's of course problematics, but if we allow it, if we stay there, we're going to stay in that argument. But what I'm inviting us to do is to go under and see what is nutritional for us. That's the level 1. Okay, stay in the plot. Level 2, how is it affecting me? But level 3, it's where the collector is digesting it, right? So I think that's an important element. We're not in these stories. What I really think it's one aspect of its healing point is there's a coming together. Parts come together. That's the so-called happy ending. It is a union of the opposites. And this merging, this metabolizing together gives us a third option. And I think this is the power of romance. I think it is the largest selling genre, by far, because it's doing something that it's doing it underneath the radar, because it's overwhelmingly written by women, for women, and it centers on women's desire. And I think that's an interesting point because it's the medicine that's working under the radar. And that's the thing we need to hold on to. We live in this culture that teaches us systematically to distrust our desire, to distrust our pleasure, to forego our bodies, definitely to forego our rage. And romance is a space where that is permitted. It's not just permitted, it's actually celebrated. It drives the story. And that's not fluff. That is so not fluff. That is so not escapism at all, right? So what I would invite you to do is to think about your reading as you're not just consuming it, you're metabolizing it. And when you do that, not only do you gain a lot more for yourself, you help the collective as well. And another point here that I've been thinking a lot about romance novels, one of its core elements, not in every plot, but it's there. It is the idea of sovereignty, of being one that knows oneself, that is in touch with one's desires, with one's wants and intentions and sense of purpose. And that's an important element. This is a compass. This is a very powerful compass. So I want you to think about your bookshelf, your to-be-read pile. It is not a guilty pleasure. That is your grimoire. That is your magical spell book. And I want you to learn how to read it if you haven't been doing that already. So if anything that I've talked to you about today in this episode is resonating, and you want to go, first of all, I invite you to practice those 3 levels if you can do that. Do it tonight. This is where I want to invite you to come check out my Forbidden Doors. So what is Forbidden Doors? Forbidden Doors is where your reading life becomes your map. You're not reading alone. Sure, you're reading alone in bed, you're reading in your Kindle, maybe on your commute. But I want you to take stock that what you're reading isn't just for you. It's much more than that. And the exploration that we're going to do in Forbidden Doors is exactly that. It's to explore what is behind these doors. And from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, and to have discussions together where we explore these as a group. I'm very much in the journey as you are in the journey. So how does it work? We're going to meet for 6 Saturdays, Saturday morning. So bring your coffee or your tea. It's going to be via Zoom. So it's on video. So you can be wearing your pajamas, be very comfortable. We meet for about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and we're going to go through these doors, and we're going to explore what's underneath the romance genre, underneath the tropes, and explore what are the ones you're gravitating towards. So it's a mixture of me talking about what I see from a depth psychology perspective, from an astrological perspective, but also inviting you to the conversation. What do you see? What's your experience? And the other thing here too is that this is to explore the genre that we are dismissing. Like I said from the beginning, even avid readers can find themselves dismissing it. And it's to explore why in this moment, why romance can be such a powerful medicine for us individually as well as collectively. Now, we're not going to be reading a specific book because we're not going to be talking about the plot of the book, but I invite you to bring the books you're reading currently or the books that really marked you. Of course, these are all romance novels. I don't care what's the subgenre you're reading, spice levels or whatever. It doesn't matter as long as it's romance. And just as a little side note, if you're wondering like, what is romance? Just think about this. It centers on relationship, usually has a happy ending or at least a happy for now kind of ending. And so that's a romance. And then you have all the subgenres you want. Thriller, mafia, sports, dark, fantasy, you name it. And this is to explore for you to help you look at your own library, your own books, your own to-be-read pile and think, this is not just books and stories. This is my spell work. This is the medicine I have right here at reach for myself. Like I said, we would be meeting 6 Saturday mornings. We start on May 16th and we go through June 27th, but we skip Memorial Day weekend because, well, it's a holiday and it's a good time to integrate. We meet from 10 to noon Pacific time via Zoom. Everything is recorded. So if you miss a Saturday, you still can catch up. But I'll be honest, the live sessions is really where the magic is because it's where you bring in your medicine and you share what is going on with you. This is the first time I'm offering Forbidden Doors. And so I really do want this cohort to be small, intimate. You're like a founding member. If you want to join, you're a founding member. You're not just a participant. You're really helping me shape something new. So your insights, your responses, your moments literally inform how I'm going to be teaching this going forward. So I don't want this to be just a sales pitch. Really, I want you to be a founding member if this resonates with you. And I think this is another point that I was saying a little bit before. It's about sovereignty. I feel that the work really underneath these stories of romance touch on something that the myth of Lady Ragnell touched on centuries ago. She was a woman, and I'll share this story more fully in Forbidden Doors, but she was a woman who was cursed into looking like a hideous hag, awful looking monster. And the only thing that could break her curse wasn't a kiss, wasn't a sword, it wasn't even bravery. It was 2 words. You choose. You have the sovereignty. You have the right to decide for yourself how you're going to be seen, when, and by whom. And I feel this is really the ultimate work of romance novels that I want to explore more fully in Forbidden Doors that we're all walking through. It's the right to reclaim our own desires as serious. That the thing we dismiss as fluff is not fluff. There's a lot of depth and a lot of healing right there underneath your nose. And I want you to think about this and trust that. So even if Forbidden Doors isn't for you right now, I invite you to think about the things you dismiss as fluff, as just escapism. Stop. Take a breather and really think. It's doing more work for you than you think. And I invite you to stay curious with that. So if this resonates with you, the details are going to be in the show notes as well, but just go to my website, vanessacuto.com, and that's Couto as in COUTO/romance online course. It's right there on the website. And of course, if you have any questions or you want to just let me know what you think about this, reach out directly through the website, or if you're here on Substack, just send me a message. And I hope you join. I hope you check it out. But more importantly, I hope you do the exercise too. Look at your reading. Look at your piles of books. What is hidden? What treasure is waiting for you right there? So just think about that. First question, what is the plot doing? Oh, why this? How does my body feel? Number 2, what is happening to me as I read these books? And number 3, zoom out. What do you see in the collective in light of the stories you're reading? Okay, so that's important. That's not just escape. And I hope you follow the thread. Like in the myth of Ariadne in the labyrinth, I'm just here holding the red thread to help you enter your own labyrinth and come out with the treasures you need. All right, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.